AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Hey everybody, it's Eric. This is going to be an awesome episode of Open Market with Heather Macaulay of MadConnect. Just a quick heads up by way of disclosure, MadConnect is a portfolio company of Imperium Ventures where I work. With that, let's have the conversation.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa. I'm joined by Eric Franchi and Heather Macaulay of MadConnect. How's it going, Heather?
Great. Thanks so much for having me. This is honestly my go-to pod in the industry, so I'm honored to be on it today. Thank you.
Oh my God. That's very flattering. Why do you listen to us? What have we done right?
I get some amazing takeaways. I think your guests are very authentic. They share the good and the bad about building, growing companies. I learn a lot about storytelling. So thank you. You're doing a good job, guys. Keep it up.
Nice. We'll always take some praise, especially we're recording this on Monday morning. Like, it's really good to start with that. So just, So you tell us about the good and the bad. So MadConnect, tell the people briefly what it is, some of the things that differentiate you and so on.
Yeah, sure. So MadConnect is solving a challenge that has been around since the beginning of AdTech and MarTech, which is platform and data connectivity for AdTech and MarTech. So if you think of all the different use cases in the industry, like audience activation, measurement, reporting, tracking, conversions, none of these platforms can stand alone in order to fulfill those use cases. You need integrations with platforms across the ecosystem. And the challenge is it's such a burden to build and maintain these integrations at scale. And so engineering and product teams are really burdened by that. And it's also a huge blocker to revenue because you don't want to spend as a salesperson in a lot of conversations talking about how we're going to get the data from point A to point B. You just want it to happen. So MadConnect is an intelligent connectivity layer that solves for all of that. I think a lot of times companies want to put us in a LumaScape box, right? They say to us, are you a cloud? Are you a CDP? Are you a clean room? And I think the challenge sometimes for MadConnect is we're none of those, right? We are not a tool within your stack. MadConnect connects all the tools in your stack. And that's really the biggest difference. Like, we're that connectivity layer.
Why did you start the business? Like, what's the origin story of MadConnect? We had Bob on, sort of emergency pod after LiveRamp was acquired. But I think the story of MadConnect and how you launched this biz is pretty interesting. Why don't you walk everybody through that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bob and I had known each other from a past life, from our Pomatic days, where we grew a really interesting business together. So I do think it's important to trust the partner that you're going to business with. And Bob had started this consultancy, which I had brought into the publisher I was at and a different company I was at. And, Bob said to me, come on over here and we'll build it. Like, we don't know what it's going to become, but let's see. And so we were a company called MadTech, which I think a lot of folks are familiar with in the industry. And really, we were working with brands, agencies, and publishers and platforms as an extension of their team on the product development side. So think about things like data readiness and systems integration and tech due diligence. And along the way, I would talk to chief product officers. I would talk to heads of revenue. And I would say, okay, what's something I can take off your plate? And I heard this pattern in the market again and again and again, which is this connectivity problem, which was, hey, gosh, I've got to connect to Meta and LinkedIn and the Trade Desk for audience activation. But my product roadmap is already so swamped. I just don't have the time to build and maintain these integrations. So Bob went one way, I went the other, and we kept hearing this in market again and again. And this is where Bob and I have always worked well together. He has such a great product mind. I'll go out into the market and just ask some good questions and do a lot of listening. And we came together and Bob said, we can build a product that answers this challenge in the market, but it's going to be hard. It's not just, about the consultancy anymore. And, we're going to be building a platform. This is going to be a product business. And we kind of had to look at each other and say, are we up for this challenge? But the opportunity was too big and too exciting for us to say no. And that's when we came together and said, let's deliver an answer to this industry-wide challenge, which has now become MadConnect.
When I think about LiveRamp, I think of it as one of the ultimate examples of like enterprise technology and ad tech, and that it's known to be like super complex. They're working through all these bureaucratic hurdles. And then when you have a startup, it's like on the one hand, you're way more nimble, right? Which is a huge advantage. On the other hand, it can be hard for a startup to get through those enterprise like sales cycles and all of that. Walk us through that.
I think it's really hard. I think in the one hand, you're right. You're nimble. Like, you build your product because other products in the market weren't taking care of it in the way they might have, like they should have. And so I think we were able to build our product in a way that could compete. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to, I think one thing, especially about being like a later stage founder, you have a lot of trust with different individuals in the industry. You've been in it for a long time. So, Bob and I did a lot of listening, and we brought on our chief data officer, Laura Macaulay, who came in from the agency side after 25 years, so bring in that perspective. But it is hard at first because, but once you get into one big account from the enterprise level, it's a spider web effect, right? Because they're asking you to connect to someone else, and then they're hearing about MadConnect, and they want you to connect to someone else, right? You're working with AWS, and they introduce you to this publisher, and this publisher wants you to connect to this identity platform, and it just keeps going from there. So I think being able to be really focused and being able to, I think, challenge the companies that have been around for quite some time and build it the right way, the way the market needs it at this moment, especially with everything that's happening with AI, I think was, important step for us.
Did you and Bob have a lot of the enterprise connections you needed from your PubMatic days and the rest of your illustrious careers to sort of get the ball rolling in that difficult space? Or how would you advise like another startup that wants to enter that kind of sector on doing it?
Yeah, I think you have to start somewhere, right? You have to start somewhere. And I think there is that market dynamic, especially on the PubMatic side. Like you have the demand, then you bring the supply in. And I think especially with what we were building at MadConnect, having the integrations, like you'll have conversations and people want some like integrations that no one's heard of. But if you start with the ones that everyone wants, which is all the socials, like the Metas, the LinkedIns of the world, then you go into the trade desks, right, et cetera, and all the DSPs. Again, there's the spider web effect in the market. And so I think, yes, we absolutely did use our connections. We didn't obviously have existing integrations. We had to build those, but we had, those relationships. But then from there, once you have that and you sort of earn that trust, it starts to grow from there. So
how difficult is it getting on some of these? So you're talking about like the largest companies in the world, in the case of like Meta and some of the socials, getting on their roadmap as a startup yourself?
It's a lot of hunting for the right person because these companies are really big. And I think, anyone, if you have an open API, you can build to it. I think the maintenance is what's hard because you have to have the right context on the product development side to understand, hey, this is when an API is going to update. And we want to be the first to know, but we're carrying now a lot of demand behind that. So instead of, saying to Meta, look, instead of you having to service 100 different clients when an integration goes down, just deal with us, right? And so we're really relieving that burden for those bigger companies. And once you have one, they sort of all start to, like I said, they all start to fall in that way. And you point to those case studies.
Heather, how have you marketed the business? Because I think like part of the reason we wanted to have you on is because I see you pretty often on LinkedIn. Like I think you're a little, open market pilled in terms of your distribution approach. So just curious to hear more about that.
We see Heather IRL, and not to answer the question for her, I think that's actually one of the biggest differentiators. But go on, Heather.
No, thank you. And I have taken a lot from what you said, Joe, especially I think you've seen Bob post a lot more and talk a lot more because he's got a lot of great things to say. And I think it can be uncomfortable for anyone to sort of post on a regular basis. But I think for us, my goal, this is going to kind of sound silly, but I wanted to get to the point where when you go to a conference and someone sees like, MadConnect on your lanyard or something like, oh, MadConnect, that's cute. What's that? I wanted to get to the point where people, want to talk to us and they know exactly what we're doing. And so our approach has been a little bit different. We started with sort of like an event strategy and bringing people together because Bob and I had, a lot of relationships in the industry and so did a lot of people at MadConnect. And we started with some smaller happy hours and parties. So that just kind of raised our brand awareness in that way. Now, I'm not advocating that anyone use events as your marketing strategy. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that people wanted to be in the room with us. And so they were willing to maybe take a meeting and listen. And so when people heard MadConnect, they're like, oh yeah, wait a minute. I've heard of that company. I'm going to take a meeting with that company because I've heard of them. We've got some really incredible people going to their events and happy hours and parties and whatnot. And then we started to look at sort of more thought leadership. And as you can see, like we're in the, definitely the trades more than we have been in the past. And we're definitely on LinkedIn, and we're traveling to all these events and speaking on different panels and on different podcasts, which really does help. So I think that's where we started, is just like, let's get this brand awareness from the highest level. But my goal going into next year is I want MadConnect to be a verb. I want people to say like, yeah, are you MadConnected in? We don't have to talk about integrations anymore. We have MadConnect. Let's move on.
I think what you're describing also, Heather, is that there's a connection between events and everything else, right? Like you basically just described all the different marketing channels you guys are on. And I think sometimes there's an attitude, especially among people from older generations in the industry, of like, oh, well, like I do it like the old school way, like I put on my like blue chinos and like whatever, and I like go into New York City and I shake hands and kiss babies. And it's like, all this stuff is complementary. Like exactly the effect you're looking for is what you described. Like you want to be the person who's on like LinkedIn or X or like in the trades or whatever, so that when you show up at the event, people know who you are and they're coming up to you and being like, I love your podcast, or I love your LinkedIn content, or you're getting the meeting you wouldn't get in the first place because of that. And then maybe the event is where you move it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes you'll say, hey, you guys you're killing it. I see it all over LinkedIn, right? You see that, you hear that a lot, which is interesting, which I don't think was the case years ago, but it is very much so now, right? It's a little bit of a different world we're in.
Yeah, it's the advantage of being able to go direct. Let's talk about company building. Like so much attention, in the broader tech space goes to like young founders, right? 20-something-year-old founders. What's it like starting a company like later in your career? Because you've been, you've had like an amazing career at PubMatic and PCH and, various places like that. And then like, what are the advantages of starting a startup later in your career?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I definitely don't think my career was like this upward trajectory. I think it plateaued in some places. And I think that's okay, especially as like, I'm a mom, I have 3 young boys. And so when I was in my 20s, and I'm not advocating for like, if you want to start a company in your 20s, go do it. But I really overinvested in my career in the sense that just building relationships, living in New York, going to absolutely every event. And then I got to a point in my career where, I've always wanted to build, but I just didn't have that opportunity because I had so much responsibility at home. And I'm proud to say that I'm over 40, and I'm okay saying that because I think there's a lot of taboo with age in our industry. And this is by far the best decade I've experienced in my career. I feel like it's really come alive. And I believe it's because of all the experience I've had thus far. I mean, I am super busy. Like I said, I'm a mom. I can't get upset about the minutia anymore. I've learned a lot of lessons along the way from other founders, and watching how even businesses I've been at have succeeded or not succeeded and the reasons why. And so it was the right moment for me to start something on my own with Bob and to co-found this with him and build it. And I couldn't see myself doing it in my 20s, even though maybe I thought I could at the time. I definitely have more confidence than I did. I know I've learned that nothing is as ever good or as bad as it seems. I've become very even in my career, meaning like, you got to celebrate the wins, but until that money's in the bank, it's not really in the bank. And so you learn a lot about that. And I don't think I was, at 25 years old personally, ready for this type of jump and leap and risk taking. And I think too, like if you think about being a founder over a certain age, like these are your years to make your highest income. They always say like after this certain point in your life. And there's a lot of sacrifices that you have to make if you're going to build a company. Like you cannot command the salary that you might be making by going to a bigger organization, right?
Yeah, income being probably at the top of the list. Yeah.
No, unfortunately no, but the prize is there, and that's what you worked for. And so the way my career sort of unfolded is interesting. I really came here because of a career setback and realized like I could go one way or the other, and I chose this way. So.
Oh, what was the setback?
So I was explaining before, my career was not an upward trajectory. Once I started to have, my children, I was on the publisher side for a long time, and I needed a new change. I felt like it was okay that I wasn't out there in the market. I wasn't traveling a lot. I was very much working internally. And then I did not feel fulfilled anymore. So I was ready for a really big splashy opportunity. And that came in the form of Zoom. And they were hiring to build out their global ads business. And I was like, oh, wow, this is the perfect job for me. It incorporates like go to market and leadership. And I have all this experience. And I heard it was very competitive. And they chose me. And I was so excited. And I remember posting on LinkedIn and thinking, I am back. Like I have been sort of on the sidelines for quite some time. And I'm ready. I'm here. And it was a highly visible role. And after a few months, the leadership team decided that ads business was a distraction. And I have so much respect for that company. It's an amazing culture and leadership team, but that's always the risk, right? Of going to a company where they're building an ads business inside a business. So my ego was just bruised and I felt so defeated. And I had to like call all these people I was doing deals with and be like, yeah, this isn't happening. And so our industry being the way they are, just reached out and said, we're going to find you the next best thing. And so I talked to all the usual suspects and all the big companies, and I was ready to take that, big splashy role again. And just something in my gut said to me, like, this just wasn't the path for me at the time. And I remember talking to this woman who is, my mentor. She was one of the only females at P&G on the executive team for years. And she said, Heather, who are you trying to like prove yourself to at this point? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to build my own company. That's what I want to do. And I think I realized that nobody really cares about your career path as much as you do. So you have to do what's right for you. Even if something looks good on paper, if it doesn't feel good, you can't do it. And so when Bob had called me again and said, hey, let's build this together, I'm like, let's do it. And I think at that age, again, being, how old I am now, I have that confidence to say, let's dive in and see what we can make of this together.
I think you're so right about choosing the career path that works for you and going after the opportunities that light you up personally, right? Because it's just like everything else in life. Like we think other people care so much about our trajectory and we perceive our own career through the eyes of others. In reality, like no one's thinking about you nearly as much as you're thinking about yourself, right? So you might as well just do whatever lights you up. Eric, I thought it could be interesting for you to weigh in on the distinction between building a company in your 20s, which you did, and then also like building companies later in life, like when you have kids, and sort of the advantages of both.
You're right. So when Mike and I started Undertone, I was 24.
Wow.
So I had nothing else going on other than, the business, right? So I think on the one hand, you have the advantage of time, energy, and focus. On the other side, you don't have a clue about life or business or really anything, right? So it's like you've got the trade-off of energy and time versus experience and wisdom. And I over the course of my career, I've come to understand that the experience that you accumulate over the years allows you to make decisions that can have far greater impact than the brute force of just like working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week in your 20s, if that makes sense, right? Just the, kind of like compounded advantage of experience times judgment times network, can lead to, fewer higher quality decisions that, can have far greater impact. So this is also one of those things you don't really understand without like going through it. So it might make sense intuitively, but perhaps Heather, again, kind of being closer to my age than Joe's, this resonates with you.
For sure. I think that you don't know what you're getting into until you sort of leap in. And there's so much energy that goes into it because when it's your own too, you're all, I'm not saying, you're always thinking about it. And I'm present with my children, yes, but I'm always thinking about how this business can get better because it's ours, right? And we're building that. I will say it's easier as my kids get older. And I think it's interesting that now my husband's also in the industry too. So we get to at least talk about these things a lot. And for the better or for worse. So sometimes date night looks a little bit different. But my kids know what I do for a living. Like we talk about it. I want them to understand like I'm putting so much effort in this. There's so much sacrifice that goes into it. So they know the different players in our industry. It's interesting. They know they can talk about what I do for a living at a very, very, very high level, which I think is cool to include them because you spend so much time at your work. I think it'd be much harder when my children were babies, but now that they're older, it's getting a little bit more manageable, but not easier.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Wait until they're a little older and they can intern. That could be tons of fun. We're having fun with that here on the pod. Yeah. Joe, you said something that I also wanted to touch on. Did actually both of you, did you see that clip? I guess it went viral like a couple days ago of Chamath Palihapitiya saying that there's no such thing as failure.
Mm-hmm. I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you watched it. It's good. It's maybe 90 seconds long. I think he's speaking to a college or university. And effectively it was what you said, Joe, which is just like, if you're judging failure in the eyes of like other people, newsflash, like other people like don't care about you. So, if you're judging failure in the eyes of yourself, there's no such thing, right? Like it just becomes about like, okay, this thing didn't work. I've now learned and I'm going to try this other thing. Right. So like, kind of like being intrinsically and internally motivated and judging failure and success just based on, hey, did it work? Did it not work? Okay, if it didn't work, I'm just going to learn. Like I thought that thing was like incredibly insightful. And it was just like, it was literally 90 seconds, but it was like a banger of a video.
Yeah. I think there is something about having kids too that I've heard people say. Obviously I don't, but people have said it focuses you, right? Like, and Heather was talking about that a bit, that like, for me, right? I'm 31. I don't have kids. I'm single. My business is the center of my life. And I get so like worked up about like every little thing. Whereas for people who have, lives, more varied lives with more going on and they have kids to think about, which is obviously like the number one priority, you don't get rattled as much by the little stuff, right? Because you have a bigger picture of what's going on. And I think that's like the hardest challenge for young entrepreneurs is like, you're so up and down and you're so like, everything is so like present.
Yeah. All consuming. I think it too, it does force me to say no more often, which I think is so important, especially in a startup, that you can't say yes to everything. You only have so many hours in the day. And so when I think of all the things I have to do in my life, right, I have to say no to more things. And I'm not even just talking about like outside of work. I'm talking about internally too. When a new customer wants something that we might not have or she serves a new use case, we have to sometimes say no. And that's really hard to do. But I think being a parent has taught me that it's okay to say that because you have to stay focused because there's only so much you can get through each day.
That's so smart. And that's what I was talking about with just like the accumulation of experience. What you're talking about, Heather, is like you are able to make instant decisions because you have so much context and you understand like what's going to happen in your experience if we do this thing that, we know is not going to work out. And it's like these unconscious decisions that you're able to just make that, again, unless you go through it, you're unable to have, I think, the benefit of these signals to make these decisions in real time.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I heard something, I was reading something the other day about that the people who make the best decisions are the people who make the most decisions because they have to make decisions fast and then they learn from that. It's not like they make the right decision all the time, but because of the accumulation of all of them, it's like they're learning faster. And you have to be able to do that, especially as a leader, I think, growing the business. You just have to make decisions, then move on. So,
I mean, doesn't it drive you insane in your personal life when you are not president or CEO of something that when you have to make group decisions, that's my least favorite thing. I'm just like, because I naturally make decisions very fast. And then like when you run an organization, you get used to doing it even faster, and like bossing people around. And then like my least favorite social situation is if I'm in a group of like 6 people and we have to figure out like where to go to dinner or something. I'm like, I am totally okay not making that decision if someone else wants to make it. If no one's going to make it, I want to make it. What I cannot tolerate is when it's like 4 people and it's like, well, we might go here or we might go there. I'm like, this is such a low stakes decision. We're just deciding on dinner. Someone decide.
I get it. I will say though, I'm even going on a girls trip soon and I'm like, somebody else make the decisions for once. Sometimes I'm just, you do so much of it at home and at work. From a social standpoint, you guys pick where we're going to go to dinner. I'm good.
I think a lot of CEOs and executives feel that way. They're like, in my personal life, could someone else make a decision because I'm just making decisions all day long? I'm like, look, I'll make all of the decisions. And as you would imagine, all of my romantic partners have loved that orientation.
Let's talk about being a female founder. How has being a woman shaped the whole journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's gotten easier over time. And I think it's because we have more women in leadership positions that we can talk to. But it was really hard, I think, maybe not so much starting out, but as I got further into my career, especially when I was ready to have children, because nobody was talking about this as much. And so I felt like at the time I had to like put my career on hold to have children. And I think now what's become easier is that there's so many different groups, and which I think is amazing, that have sprouted out with women, especially within the ad tech community, that are having these conversations about how it is sometimes difficult to be a woman in this industry, especially having children and having to maybe, like I said, maybe it's okay if your career takes a plateau for a little bit. But I would say, especially like when you're talking to investors, like it's mostly male driven. To me, it's been a little bit easier in the sense that there's more peers for me to talk to. But, you know, it's tough because sometimes I hear a lot, which I know everybody's trying and there's more awareness, but I'll hear things like, we want you on stage because we need a woman. We need to check that box. Or we want you on this because we need a woman. And I'm not shaming anybody because we all do it. Like sometimes I do it. But when you're on the other side of the table hearing that, you're like, oh man, like I'm only invited on because of my gender. Like you want to be invited on because you're passionate, energetic, and knowledgeable and all of these things. And I'm hearing that happen more and more, that people are like, well, we just need a woman. And no, maybe you need someone, you should say something like, we need someone who's intelligent, creative, and all these things that person is. So it has not, I think too, it depends upon your partner. Like I will say this about Bob Walzak. Even when we were at PubMatic together, he was never like, hey, you got to hire more women or you got to hire more men. He just wanted me to hire like the best people possible. At MadConnect, we have, a lot of females representing the business right now, which is great.
Besides Bob, I think it's the whole leadership team, right?
Yeah, it's our chief data officer, our head of engineering, our head of ops, and our head of account management. And it just so happened to be that way. And we have a lot of amazing men on the team too. Don't get me wrong. But
Bob's all right.
So I would say Bob definitely makes it easier. Yeah. Great, man. Look, I have all brothers. I have all boys in my house. Even my dog's a boy. So a lot of male energy.
What more can be done? What more should we as an industry do?
I think first of all, getting more women on stage speaking, yes. But the reasons why, I think letting people know that when you're talking to that woman, saying like, we want you on stage because of X, X, and X. And starting to think that way, which I think we've gotten more awareness, but then I think we have to have a little more empathy towards the fact as well. And I think as an industry, we're starting to support more of these women-led groups. Like I noticed, for instance, that during IAB Leadership Summit and a lot of things, there's a lot of golf going on. And, I just don't golf. And so I created these blowout bars for women. So instead of going golfing, we can get our hair done and have fun, right? And it's one less thing we have to worry about because we all have to wear better hair. So doing things like that has been helping. And I have a lot of support coming from males who sponsor that because they want to help celebrate the fact that they, they're respecting how everything's shaping up. And it's a good question, Eric. But I think it's just, you guys are all doing the right thing and supporting and having women as guests. And I think that's great because we have a great story to tell and it's important.
Yeah, and you guys have to do an hour of work every day for the conference before the conference begins, right? I just put sunscreen on my bald head. That's all I do.
Let me tell you.
I'm fucking locked and loaded.
That's the truth of it. When my husband and I pack for Cannes, I'm like, it must be nice just to pack your bag. And that's it. We plan our outfits. We plan all the things.
Meanwhile, Eric is like, can you wear shorts? That's the big question.
By the way, everybody asked that question this year. And I hope you guys only pack shorts moving forward because it was a hot one.
I think I'm anti-shorts. I tried it. It just doesn't feel right. But I live in Miami now, so I'm totally on how to dress in 90-something degree weather and humidity. Yeah, it's just the materials, guys. It's just you've got to wear linens. It can't be, if you're wearing those tight cotton pants, you're going to be hot as hell.
Yeah.
Billowy linens. Heather, where do you stand? And I'm super interested in this just as a cultural matter. Where do you stand on the have it all discourse?
I believe that you can have it all, but not all at once. And what I mean by that is Someone told me this once, and it changed the way I think of everything, was that you can't optimize all parts of your life at the same time. So have a check-in with yourself every year, every 2 years about what you're willing to give up and not give up for your career. And that has completely changed the way I look at having it all. Because if I decide, maybe 8 years ago, I decided like I wanted to keep, foot in the door in the terms of this industry, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice such a huge part of me because I had little babies. I had one after the other. So that part of me, I was optimizing maybe my life at home. Now it's a little bit different, the conversation. So I feel differently about things that I did 5 years ago. And that's okay because I'm optimizing things differently. And so I think if you go into it thinking that, everyone has 24 hours a day. And so you have to realize what you're willing to give up and not give up, right? To have that career. And it's going to look different at all points in your life. And I think you can't compare it to other people. You just have to compare sort of like the last version of yourself. So having it all at once it doesn't happen.
That resonates with me. I don't have as much personal experience with it, but I've always liked that line of like, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once, because it is just important to recognize like the physical reality of like, if you're going to spend, 3 hours or 4 hours a day being a parent, which obviously you spend more than that, but if you're going to spend that time like really present and locked in, even if you have childcare help, like, there are like certain things you'll have to give up, and then you'll make up for other things, as you guys were talking about in terms of experience and leverage.
I think it's about making that decision too. We talked about decisions earlier. When you make a decision at this point in your life, you're going to have to sacrifice some of your time with your children for your career. You have to be okay with that. Then you have to know, I'm going to miss things, but I have to be okay with that because I made this decision at this point to give these things up. So that guilt that we all sometimes, I know, especially as mothers, I'm sure, just as human beings, we carry around, it really does ease that guilt because you're kind of telling yourself, no, I made this choice and I'm sticking with it until I feel like the need to evaluate that again.
Can you define having it all? Actually, both of you, I'd love to get your takes on it.
It's like yeah. Well, I think it's like a huge part of like feminism discourse. I feel like, especially in the post like Sheryl Sandberg lean in like period, was just like, I feel like it's this idea of like having economic prosperity and succeeding in your career, but then also having a family and just like this full life and all this stuff. But how do you view it, Heather?
I would say all those things. I would say that you are taking care of yourself in terms of self-care. You're spending enough time with your children that you never feel guilty. You have a flourishing career. You have a flourishing social life in your town. You have an amazing marriage. Like every single part of your life is just humming along and you're feeling good. And to me, that doesn't happen. Like if I spend a lot of time at work, I do feel a little bit guilty about leaving my kids. And when I spend some more time with my kids, I'm like, what am I missing out here? And so you're never going to be able to have this balance of every single part of your life being okay. I sacrifice a lot of like social time in my town with neighbors and other things because I've decided that like work and my kids are most important to me right now. And that's where I'm going to spend all my time. But someday I'll go back to that.
What's really interesting is I feel like the have it all discourse, not in the same way, and men will never face the same level of pressure, expectation or judgment that women do. But I feel like there is a little bit of that like infiltrating like the male discourse, like because there's a lot of focus. Like if you think about like the like sort of male centric conversation on like a platform like X, there's a lot of like male entrepreneurs out there being like, young man, you need to go get yourself a wife and like choose wisely. And like a good wife is like the foundation of like all of your success and the most important decision you'll make. And then it's also like eat healthy and like go to the gym, like don't be out of shape. Like I do think that has changed a little bit where it's like maybe like 10 years ago, it was like you wouldn't have seen as many male entrepreneurs out there being like, not only talking about like their family life and like your choice of partner being the most important choice you're making, all this kind of stuff, but also like the health stuff, right? Like it was like, you weren't scrutinized as much if you were fat. Whereas now, honestly, like it is such a thing in like entrepreneurial discourse that it's like, if you're not in shape, what are you doing?
Yeah, I've told this story probably on this pod where after we sold Undertone, I was a mess, like particularly physically. And I had let my health go. I had let like all of my personal interests go. Like I was like out of shape and boring and like not in a great place. And, thankfully I was able to shift, my spend of time post exit to take care of all that stuff. And, we're on the other side of it. And, I feel great. And, things are great. But I agree. Like, this is a more modern phenomenon. And I think, frankly, it's better. I think just having the discussion around, like, don't just go so all in that you let literally every part of your life atrophy besides like your professional self. I think that's a good thing for both men and women, all of us.
Completely agree.
I always think that when I see the discourse about like, working like from basically the time you wake up until the time you go to bed, is I'm like, I genuinely don't believe that makes anyone maximally effective.
Not
at all.
You cannot be maximally effective if you're working 16 hours a day. You need like a few hours at least to like go to the gym and like eat your chicken and rice and, all that good stuff.
Yes, 100%. Like, especially I think as you grow in your career too, and you become more of a leader making bigger decisions, you need to take yourself away from a moment to be able to come back and make the right type of decisions. You can't be, it can't be all consuming all the time. Not healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I made it just a personal challenge to just get back into hitting like a step target every day. And I feel great. Like, it's just like the only thing I've changed. And, I'm just like at minimum trying to do like 10,000. I'll, often do 15,000. I have not felt like this good in the longest time. And it just, like that's an hour of just like pulling everything out and just making sure like I get, that amount of steps in over the course of the day, maybe like 2 walks or something like that. And, a call with Joe during one of them.
You need to do something physical while you're listening to Joe Rogan talk about BJJ for 3 hours. You can't just be sitting during that. That's like an active experience.
I do listen to you guys when I run too. That's I do.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I find people get so enraged by Joe's takes that it allows them to increase their games a little.
I'm really touched by that. If you ever see me listening to a podcast in the gym, I'm depressed. The podcast for me, it's not gym time. Gym time is like, I'm listening to a very hype rap song and I'm like, ah. And then
I'm not lifting, Joe.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not lifting to you guys. I'm running to you guys. I feel like there's a difference.
No,
like,
there is.
It's like you're telling me a story. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But when I have friends who are like, I'm listening to Ezra Klein in the gym, I'm like, then you're not really going to the gym. Like, you're not taking the gym seriously.
So we'll round the corner here. But speaking of fitness, and I like the direction that this pod has taken. We had this guy, Adam Epstein, on last week, who's the founder and CEO of GG, another Aperion portfolio company. And he posted himself doing chin-ups, warming up for the pod. And he wants to make fitness challenges a thing for all guests of Open Market. How do you feel about that, Heather?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that right now because it's not my arms day. But I did go for my run this morning. I will challenge Adam back. I will give him more time to work on his chin-ups if he lets me handle his integrations.
Oh, okay. Wow. I thought you were going to say, I thought you were going to challenge him to a run. You're going to be like, work on my turf.
We can do that too. But I'll give him some time back in his day if he wants it.
Adam, 5 mile run recorded. Sent us. That's Heather's challenge for you.
We'll listen to each other on the podcast and just start running next to each other. I think that'd be good.
Exactly. Well, on the last pod, I said I could do 20 chin-ups, and now I'm like, I must make sure that my form on those 20 chin-ups is like immaculate because I've now stated publicly that it can happen. So I will be working on that in the gym.
20 clean chin-ups is really impressive, Joe.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I think I can do that. I think I've done it.
Get some good rap on. You can do it.
All right.
I'll wait for the video, but I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah. Look, CES, we're all meeting in the Cosmo gym. I went there during CES this year. Didn't see any of you mother effers in there, but I will be there and we'll have a chin-up challenge.
Amazing.
I like it.
Heather, thank you so much. This has been like a different but awesome conversation. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you both for letting me on and having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week, everybody.